Hello, Underminers and Overmajors. We are back for episode 48 of season 4. It's been a very long season, but it's just the second night of Phish's 4-night New Year's Eve 1997 run. The previous night, last night, for those time traveling with us, the circus came to Landover, Maryland at the U.S. Air Arena, which deadheads and hockey fans alike will identify by its preferred pronouns, the Cap Center. But we're moving some 200 miles up the eastern seaboard to New York, New York, to the venue that all of you know as YMSG. But first, let me say that you're listening to Undermine. I'm your host, Tom Marshall, and I'm joined today by my co-hosts, RJB and Benji Eisen, who are here to represent America's youth.
Well, at least America's youth circa 1997. Our hands are faster than guns.
We are entering the world's most famous arena for a 3-night run. I'm excited about. I didn't see a show at MSG until 2010, so you can ask me to leave now if you want. But assuming that you guys saw Phish before 2010 at this venue, what does this show bring back in terms of memories? Just, getting to the Garden for this multi-night run, because this was a pretty historic one with 3 nights right at New Year's, and continues to this day. What does this venue and time bring back for you guys?
Okay, I don't know if this is exactly answering your question, but when Phish played here the first time, 94, I do remember my impression of walking into the Garden, because I don't think I'd seen any concerts. I'm not sure. I did see a Dead show. All right. Well, anyway, I had this very, very vivid memory of being with my mom at Barnum and Bailey's Circus as a really young kid. And I asked her later, and she thinks I was 5, which would put it, and this reveals how old I am, but so does Wikipedia, at 1968, which is unbelievable. But I think possibly correct. And then I saw the circus a few more times in the 70s. But I remember when I walked in there with Phish, I was like, oh my God, I've been here before, and Phish is here now. And it meant a whole lot to Trey, and it was incredible. But as far as Phish and early appearances at MSG, my wife disputes this, but I don't think I've missed an MSG show until this very last New Year's run, when I missed the first 2. I saw every Baker's Dozen, for example. So I have lots of MSG shows in my back pocket. How about you, Benji?
Well, the first band that I saw there, because I had been to Penn Station, obviously, with my parents, and being from Pennsylvania, I would take the train in to the city. But my first show at Madison Square Garden was Phish, 12/31/95. And I think that this night that we're talking about was probably therefore my second show, because I didn't go to they did these, they didn't do 94 I didn't go. Yeah, this would have been my second show at the world's most famous arena. But RJ, yesterday when I said that the thing that came to my mind about that show, the very first thing that came to my mind had less to do with the show and more to do with the experience. The problem with this one is that and I say problem, that's probably not the right word. There's no problem with this show. The thing about this show, though, is the whole show is just so damn good that, 3 decades later, and people, this is a show that friends of mine comment on. And when we first started doing the Undermine, this season, and it was apparent that we were going to do everyone from 97, people would ask me about this show and say, you guys are definitely going to cover this show, right? And 1230. I still remember, I remember where I was dancing for that Can't Turn Me Loose jam, and I didn't even know what that was at the time. I recognized that it was something, but I didn't have an iPhone with Phish Twitter in my pocket to keep me up to date or to fetch it. So I knew it was something, and then I had to ask after the show. But you asked about memories. My first memory that comes to mind from this night is being outside the venue on the way in, because there's that major bottleneck at MSG by the entrances, and it's a freezing winter evening. Everyone's bundled up in their coats, and I remember being asked on the way in by a local news thing. I think I don't remember what the actual question was, which is pretty on brand for me. But I remember my answer. I said that Phish at Madison Square Garden was a tradition in the making. And I was at the time I was just trying to give a good soundbite that would make it to the local news. But history will tell you that I actually nailed it.
You actually did nail it. And I was almost certainly there, but I had to go back and re-listen. But RJ, I know you were busy doing other things that night back in '97. But I'm sure you've had this show in your collection for as long as you can remember. If that's true, what are your first set takeaways?
Yeah, I'm going to try not to talk on every episode of this run about how much I regret not going, but wait till we get to 12/31/97. I have a real regret for that one. But I remember, getting these tapes, and I remember side B of the first set was Fluffhead, Dirt, and Antelope, and that part of the first set and the theme that leads into it is just phenomenal. I mean, that's like 45 minutes worth of music between those four songs, and it's just really like the Antelope to close the set is just amazing. But I really love the long Fluffhead jam, a nice breather like Dirt, and then Antelope, which was just at the time was just, you just couldn't go wrong with Antelope. And at the end of the Antelope, they get into, back into the fall '97 funk, and that, to me, that whole segment is just incredible. What do you guys remember from set one?
Well, from memory, not much. And that's because for years now, decades at this point, when I go to pull the show up, I'm usually going straight for that second set. But the Antelope, as you mentioned, RJ, it really stands out here because they've played Antelope over 400 times since its debut, something close to 500 at this point. And it debuted in 1985. And so that's a lot of Antelopes. And I'm sure between the three of us, we've heard hundreds of them. But if you played me a 30-second snippet of this one blindfolded, I don't know why I'd have to be blindfolded, but I would immediately be able to locate it in 1997. Because of the end, the funk jam. We talk a lot about how we as a community, as a Phish community, we've kind of willfully let the Nelson Mandela effect warp our perception of fall '97. And what I mean by that is it's a mass hallucination / a little bit of revisionist history. And so when we look back at '97, we think of it as this, as the funk was the cow funk was the stamp and the signature of the tour. And we got to this a lot this whole season of Undermine. Yes, the band was listening to James Brown on the bus every night. Yes, they were doing breakdowns. They were filled with the funk, but for just a small portion of each show. It was like, it was a new bag or trick. It was something that they would focus on and try to do in new jams and go new places with, and then, Black Eyed Katie and stuff like that. But for the rest of the time, Phish was still certifiably Phish, same as they ever were. And that still meant being a different band every night, same as it ever was. Anyway, guys, the Antelope is on the spot in the show. It's the James Brown spot. You guys really have been studying the James Brown tape, huh? Trey even said something about how on top of the Antelope, he says something, he gives a little bit of the banter, how he's going to, they're going to play some little bit more funky music if everyone just sticks around for the second set, which was also very true. And with him talking about self-referencing how they're going to play some funky music, and if we want to dance, we can. There's a kind of Back to the Future foreshadowing of the last night of the Island tour, which we'll get to. But for now, it's probably, looking at the clock, it's probably set break.
I think you're right. One of the things I had to go back and re-listen to because it was sort of sporadic and random whenever I would get called up to do the Rai Rai Rocco Marco Escondolas for Antelope. I had to listen to make sure that it wasn't me, and heard Trey say that funk thing that you just said probably about 15 minutes ago. I was just listening to it, and what an amazing Antelope. Everything, what a great set. RJ, you're right. It was just a wonderful set. But it is set break, and that means we will be right back after these words. We are back. We can't turn you loose yet. What am I getting at? We'll get at it. RJ, tell us what you're thinking about when you think about this second set, please?
So I think this is slightly controversial, maybe, but this set has always been kind of elusive for me. I think people who were there, and I think a lot of fans love it, maybe more than I do. And I'll just spoiler alert. I think the night after this is just, I think, one of the greatest shows of all time. So maybe that just overshadows it for me. But this did get the live Phish release, and there's a lot here. The Down with Disease is long, but it kind of is meandering for a little bit, but then it gets going, and the Bowie is really amazing. And then there's this the possum transition, and the jam with Can't Turn You Loose is awesome. So I guess that's what makes it great. But I always go to the first set of this show, Benji, and I think I'm making a mistake. So tell us about your thoughts on this particular set.
Well, I think it's context, right? And that is that Phish in 1997, for those of us that were there for the previous years, with me, I got into them at the end of 93, beginning of 94. And there were a lot of fans that when Phish kind of shifted their focus into a more, arena, first in 96, they do the arena rock thing. And then 97, they added that, extremely well documented by us, as well as most fans. They got into the funk, and they got into what we call Cal funk or a groove, and that we talked about a lot. This night, on paper, looks a lot to be more like a classic pre-97 show. And so I think that that's a little bit about what's going on when you say that people are praising it. It's because there's a familiarity to it. The Down with Disease, opener. And then I just feel like the David Bowie, the thing is that on paper at that time, if I saw David Bowie on a set list, I knew that it was probably the highlight of the show, right? If not the highlight of my life, at the time. And by 97, the Bowies were, classic Bowies are a little bit before then. Bowie kind of peaked in 95, 94, 95, with lots of great Bowies since then, of course. And then Down with Disease being from that era, and then of course you get into Possum, Tube, You Enjoy Myself. On paper, it looks a lot to be like a very classic, 94, 95 show. And then by the time they get into Possum, though, first of all, I think it is possibly one of the greatest segues of Phish.
It's black magic.
It's
I have no idea, unless they practiced that specific thing, how they did it. Does anyone know? Do you remember? Like, were they signaling, or they just somehow? Are they just the best band in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I remember thinking they're the best band in the world. When they did
Both
that,
could be true. Both could be true.
Both things could be true. That's true. But it just seems it's so incredible. And then, I mean, even if they had pre-planned that, which I question, even if they did that, though, they couldn't have pre-planned the Can't Turn You Loose, because you can hear them kind of page words towards it. And then it was such an example of one of the things that Phish does better than anybody, in my opinion, is this generosity of spirit, where when the jam goes a certain way, and one person starts tinkering with an idea, how the rest of the band rallies behind them. And it's like, oh yeah, let's go there. You guys, what's over here? I don't know. Let's find out. And so there's this in this, in the Possum, when they go into Can't Turn Your Loose, they're all right on it. But if you listen very carefully, maybe slow down, it's you can hear the idea come, and it's kind of Page that has it. And then the whole band just goes into it with such skill and confidence that it was like they had practiced it. For a lesser band, which is 98% of the bands out there, they would have had to practice this note by note to pull it off, and probably for a week of rehearsal, whereas Phish just did it effortlessly.
But it is a familiar song. Like, it almost sounds like there's like it almost sounds like three other songs. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I was able to identify it when it was happening, but yet we all knew the song.
Yeah.
But I just kind of and still, even on re-listen, I don't think it was practiced. I think it was just these guys know this stuff so well.
And the generosity of spirit, the hey, let's try this, and having a confidence with it. So I mean, it's debatable whether or not, it's not really debatable. There's an answer for whether or not they had pre-planned the segue into Possum from Bowie to begin with, because that's just it floors me every time to this day. Every time I hear it, I'm floored. There's a handful of other segues that Phish has done like that, and just a handful, over their entire career. So this is a top 3, top 5 segue for sure. And that to me is probably one of the things that makes the night. It's because RJ, to be fair to your point, it is true that the Down with Disease and the Bowie on paper gets me excited. It makes it look like it's a particular type of show, and then you see the timings, and they're also very they bode well. But the actual songs, they don't really go into that type 2 territory. They kind of just jam, and they kind of just stretch them out in a very competent way. But it's not, they don't really do it. The excitement in this set is all in the second half. And Possum for me is very rarely a highlight. Back then, though, it might have been more, because back then they Possum was this kind of hotbed of experimentation where they did a lot of quotes and they did a lot of teases. Sometimes they'd even do a little medley of all the other songs they played in that particular show in a Possum, and they'd throw in a Lizard's Lick and a Divided Sky Lick. So this played perfectly into that, but it also just had that. At this point, the first set is kind of them settling into the building. They're kind of like, we're in MSG, we're here for 3 nights now.
Yeah.
Then the second set is them starting off a very mid-90s set list, and then the second half is, and look what we can do.
Yeah.
So that starts with the Possum and extends the tube kind of is an extension of that. The tube is 100% a fall 97 tube.
Yeah, I do think earlier in the set, the Down with Disease jam, when it eventually kind of gets into probably the last 5 minutes or so, it gets into like a blues jam, and it's almost like and then the Possum, Can't Turn You Loose, that all gets into like a bluesy. It was almost like there wasn't a lot of funk until they got into that tube, which really does feel feels like Dayton and feels like fall 97. Which I think is interesting that they were just able to kind of flow between those, musical approaches. And I that whole set is just one big segue, and that's just going between like Down with Disease with this blues jam at the end to like the intensive tension and release, thrilling, Bowie, and then the Possum, which is just like fun, and then back into tube, and then you enjoy myself to close it out. It's just it's a pretty impressive piece of music from a band.
And then
question.
The thing is, yesterday we talked about how the encore was Jimi Hendrix, and I think I mentioned in yesterday's episode about how tonight it was Led Zeppelin. There's another element to it here, another layer, and that's that for a lot of people, myself included, especially at that age, when MSG, this was, like I said earlier at the top of this episode, it was my second show ever in that building. But the building had a mythology to it, not only as the greatest and most famous arena in the world, and every band and every magazine talks about how, it's the Holy Grail, but a lot of that has to do because of Led Zeppelin, because of The Song Remains the Same, and of the concept film that was filmed inside that building, which Trey has guaranteed seen how many times, Tom? Numerous times, right?
A lot, but he was mad that they cut the jams.
See, there you go. Yeah, and so this was his moment to be on that stage. And
I have the same complaint about Bittersweet Motel, by the way. So
He was just paying back.
Yeah.
His payback.
But anyway, I mean, I think the fact that they did an encore that was Led Zeppelin was not lost on Trey, and I think that and it wasn't lost on the audience.
You guys, we're definitely going to talk about this tomorrow for the 30th show. But having seen tons of New Year's, there's always this mythology. There's always this thinking that the 30th is actually better than the New Year's show, the New Year's gag show or whatever. Was that already in place by now in 97?
I mean, I think so. Like I go back always to 12/29/94 and the Providence show, which has my favorite jam of all time as like the highlight of that New Year's run. And I don't know, Benji, about 12/31/95 is is probably the best New Year's show they've ever played. So it's hard, but you know, the 1229 show of that year was great also. And you know, I think like most years, the show before the show, or one of the shows before the show, is possibly the show of the run. I don't know, Benji, what do you think?
I agree. I love the Gads, possibly because my first show was a New Year's Eve show, and so that was, that was to me what Phish was supposed to do at every show, bring an aquarium with them. But I also, I have as a child, I have a lot of Broadway music, a love for Broadway and for theatrical productions. And so I love it when Phish does that. I also, love their sense of humor has always been aligned with my sense of humor, and that comes into play on New Year's Eve. So, and it's a 3-set show, and there's the pageantry and the revelry of it. That being said, I do think that most of the time, the best show is either the 29th or the 30th. And I kind of have a bone to pick with all the people, with every single Phish fan online, and here we go.
Awesome.
And that's that when somebody says, when they try to predict, they're like, that's going to be the show of the run, or that someone last year was like, they said that they knew what they thought was going to be the best show of the summer based on the venue. And it's not like Phish gets there and they're like, guys, tonight's going to be our show. Like, let's make, so it's not like for the New Year's run, they're saying, oh, tonight's the 29th, tonight's the big one, or tonight's the 30th, we better not blow it. They get out there and they give it, that's why we go to all these shows. They give it 150% every show. And if not, we want a refund, And so they put it all on the line, and some days are better than others. And the thing is that on New Year's Eve, they have so much riding on their shoulders.
Yeah.
They know that they have a lot of people there because it's New Year's and not because they're Phish. Whether it's people, they bring their wives when their wives don't usually come to shows, or their husbands for that matter, or, or some friend is like, what are you guys doing on New Year's? Oh, you're all going to Phish? I'll come with you. So there's a lot of that. And then the gag, and a lot of the times, the gag they have to interact with it. So I can only imagine as performers, that's on their mind, until they're done with it. They're nervous about it, and they want to pull it off, and they have all this stuff going on in their minds. So the 29th and the 30th is kind of their chance in reverse to blow off steam and to not care about it. And here there's the additional layer, especially in this night, because Madison Square Garden, I think, was a pretty intimidating play for them. Right. And when Phish is intimidated, that's not the right word, but when Phish is out of their element, and a great example is a festival, when they're playing something where they're not quite super comfortable because they know that it's bigger than them, or it's different, or whatever. They want to show off their best foot forward. And by doing that, they sometimes don't, because they do the compositions, and they never fully let go. They never fully let go, because you don't want to fall on your face in front of their fan base. If they fall on their face, we love it. We're like, great, keep it going, because we know that that's how you get to these incredible moments.
Well,
but for a fan that's only giving them, for a first timer that's not going to give them the benefit of that doubt, they know that, and there's this responsibility to entertain every single person in that building. And so I think that the first set of this night, they're acclimating to that, and they're playing to that, and they're trying to show off to everyone that came from New York, all these New Yorkers who are very tough music fans. On the West Coast, the Grateful Dead used to say that on the West Coast, they could play to their biggest fan base in San Francisco, and they could play a horrible show and no one even noticed, because everyone's having a great time. And in New York City, if you play a bad note, or if you play a bad show, the crowd's going to let you know. And so I feel like that's going on in their minds. And then the second set, they just own it.
That will have to suffice as a preview for tomorrow's show, and then of course for the New Year's show. Great talking with you guys about it. I agree. I think there's something magic about the 30th. I think, like you said, Benji, there's they're relaxed, especially when they're not traveling now. There's something cool about being in a residency. You don't have travel on your mind. You're just sort of settled in. You don't have to do a sound check, or if you do a sound check, it's for fun, it's for practice. Whatever. So anyway, they're loose, they're ready. Let's see what they do tomorrow. And that's going to do it for us today. Say good things about us and keep us in your heart, please. Put us back on your dial tomorrow when we return for night 3 of Phish's New Year's Eve 1997 run. Undermine is brought to you by Osiris Media. Executive producers are Thomas Marshall, RJB, and Benji Eisen. It's edited by Eric Limarenko. Mixed and mastered by Matt Dwyer. Production assistance from Nick Sejas. Original music by Amar Sastry. And art by Mark Dowd. Thanks.